And welcome back everyone to the recap of round number 5 of my match against Grandmaster David Navara. Today it was quite difficult to reach the same level of excitingness as we did yesterday. In case you haven't seen the recap of yesterday's game, make sure to check it out. It was one of the probably the most exciting game, I think, by a big margin that I ever played in my whole career. So from now on, it's going to be difficult to come close to that level. But I still think that today's game was there were some interesting moments which I would like to show you. Before this game, just as a quick reminder, I was leading the match by 1 point. So let's have a look if I managed to maintain my lead in this game. I opened with knight f3 as I did all my games in this match. David replied with d5, which was also his usual reply in all of the games so far. And we reached the same opening, the classical Queen's Gambit. So now I can already say it's not kind of a big surprise anymore. This is what I deeply studied as a preparation towards this match. And we got this position on the board in all of my white games in this match so far. And in this game, David again went back to the Ragozsin, which I thought was kind of a thing which I more or less expected him to do, since he lost his game with the Cambridge Springs in round number 3. Even though he got a decent position out of there, but compared to the first game where he played the Ragozsin, there he had a much better position and came pretty close to winning. And it's also kind of his main choice nowadays to go for the Ragozsin, and a very reliable weapon in his repertoire. I went for bishop g5. This is this was kind of my next idea to play. In round number 1, I went for this line, where I prepared an interesting idea there. But I just didn't want to repeat the same line again. Instead, I went for bishop g5. He played h6. He already has quite a few games here. I think also at some point I must have, while I was still working with working for Pentala Hare Krishna, I think that we prepared twice against Navara with white pieces, and we also had a look at some of those Ragozins, and I still remember also checking David now that he has many games in this line. I went for the classical approach with e3. Short castle, now rook c1. Yeah, one thing which I wanted to mention here, of course there are other moves for black, for example d takes e4, knight bd7, which are also completely playable. But h6 is also the move I play myself as black and also recommend in my Nimzo Ragozsin course for Chessable. And it's probably the most solid weapon. So e3 short castle, rook c1, we're following mainline territory here. And here David played the move knight c6, which I don't think he has ever done before. I still prepared it, but it was not kind of my main focus, because usually he's going for c5. And obviously there's no advantage to gain there whatsoever, but I think I did come up with quite an interesting idea, which I wanted to play. Unfortunately, we don't get to see it because he went for knight c6. Sorry, I think I mentioned that c5 was the move he usually played. D takes c4 is the main line. Bishop takes c4 and c5. This is how it goes here. I don't think that c5 is a good move here because of e takes d5. Knight c6 is an interesting alternative, though. I think that knight c6 and knight d7 can also be played. This tends to be quite similar, just as an example, to those classical Queen's Gambit lines with bishop e7, knight e4. When black is also very solid, but it is a little bit of a passive position for black. But it's another playable approach. Knight c6 looks a little bit strange because black is blocking this pawn, but the main idea is that black can sometimes take on c4 and then push e5, which is also exactly what happened in the game. I did spend a couple of minutes at this moment, not because I didn't know the line, but mostly just trying to think which one I want to choose. I knew that bishop e2 was in the end my main move, and probably the most solid choice, but there are also other options. For example, I knew that h3 is actually one of the very critical moves. You could also think about taking on d5 and now arguing that in this Carlsbad structure the knight is misplaced on c6, which also gives white some chances to play for an edge, but also black is probably not that unhappy here because black gets also kind of a fighting position. And the point of h3 is if black goes for rook d8, which I think is a logical move. D takes c4 would make less sense now, because now compared to the game I have extra h3, which should definitely be useful for me. And the point is, after h3 rook d8, then now white wants to take, and now bishop d3, and for example bishop g4 is out of the position, and h3 is probably more useful than rook d8, because usually black anyway protects the pawn with 97 in those positions. Okay, just I don't want to get into too much detail here with this h3 line. I don't think there are many games here, but there are also some slight problems with h3. For example, that black I think can immediately push e5 here, and then it can get a little bit more complicated. Just quickly, I think this is one of the lines which is critical. But it goes on. Black has pretty decent compensation. I was not like 100% familiar, so I went with a solid choice, bishop e2. David took on c4. After the game, he mentioned to me that I think it was a3. And then what did he say? That at some point there is some idea to play with b6. I think if b takes c3, then black can play with this b6 here. But well, I guess this is also possible for white, but I think what I did was quite principled. And then David mentioned that here maybe bishop takes c3 could be possible, and trying to transpose to this position. But I don't think I have to, now that I think about it, I could maybe take with rook instead. But e5, and well, it does look fairly solid for black as well. If d5 97 should be okay, and okay, if I take, then I don't think anything is happening. Kind of similar to the game, even a much better version for black, or a little bit of a better version for black should be. So I think I would have probably taken b takes c3, and now maybe b6 is actually an option for black to play. I don't know what I would have done. Short castle, bishop b7, maybe bishop d3, just stepping out of it. And I think black gets a fairly normal position to play. Probably more imbalanced than it was in the game. But also white has some trumps. I might even have looked at this position, and then white has the plan to push f4, f5. And I thought it could be dangerous for black. It's kind of similar to some other Ragozsin variations, but I think a better version for white, because the bishop is on d7 and not on b7. And from there on, I think it was stopping f5 a bit better. Anyway, David played e5. I was still familiar with this position, short castle, and now e takes d4 I was not so familiar with anymore, even though it's a very logical move. I still kind of knew or assumed that knight d5 must be the move. It's a very typical move in those positions, gaining an important tempo. What I did know here was that after bishop takes e3, b takes e3, bishop g4 I think is what I looked at, h3, and I only recalled bishop takes f3, and then that this endgame should be slightly more pleasant for white with a pretty nice plan. I remember going king g2, king g3, and then f4 should be the best plan here for white. And it seems like the bishop is a bit better than the knight in this position. All of the light squares are a little bit weak. So I was looking forward to getting this position. If bishop h5 here, during the game I thought that now I could maybe consider bishop d5, putting pressure on the pawn on e5 now as well. And now the inclusion of h3, bishop h5 might favor me quite a lot, because at some point I could actually threaten to play g4. And if rook d8, I don't know, maybe bishop e4 could be played. I don't know if taking on c6 brings me anything. I mean, it could also be an idea, and here maybe g4 works. That might be possible. But David didn't go for it. He took on d4, knight d5, queen d6. Knight takes d4 seemed natural. The other option was knight takes b4, but I'm not really gaining anything here. I think I'm just giving black some extra options by taking on b4 first. This would transpose to the game now, but I thought that here maybe black has some other options. Maybe also knight takes b4 becomes an opportunity. And also here I thought that I'm keeping some options. I think he has to take on d4, otherwise he also needs to take knight b5 into consideration, or just knight takes c6 followed by knight takes b4, obviously. So he took, and here I guess it should be a critical moment. In hindsight, I didn't really get anything out of the position now with knight takes b4. Maybe what the engine wants to do is queen takes d4, but I wasn't so sure here if he goes bishop c5. Because, I mean, with the bishop pair now, there is some imbalance. If I don't do something quickly, I thought that well, that at least David will keep some fighting chances. And considering the whole match situation, I wanted to have something very safe, put some pressure, and take my chances if I get them. If I don't get them, then it's going to be a draw. Maybe there's something here which white can try. Perhaps queen e4. I just saw that black will get c6 next, and then my knight has to retreat, and the dark split bishop could be quite good in the long run. So I quickly looked at queen e4, queen c3, but here, I mean, I just didn't see any tricks after c6. Like bishop takes f7 is just not there, and if knight f4, bishop e6, it's still quite a far. Like black is still quite far away from actually pressing here, but queen e7 runs into knight g6, I guess. White still may have some initiative here now that I look at it, because this bishop on c8 is not really coming out. But it wasn't that obvious to me. And after knight takes b4, queen takes b4, queen takes d4, I still felt like I should have somewhat of an initiative in this position, just because I have control over the d file. His bishop is a little bit passive, and I also have a lead in development. But to be fair, black is also very solid. He played c6. And now I went for the move a3, which may look pretty strange, but I actually did have one idea behind it, which is that if he goes bishop e6 now, then I wanted to take, and if queen takes e6, then queen b4, and now the pawn on a2 is not hanging. And I thought here I could have some pressure because b7 is hanging, and if I manage to triple on the d file, or double on the d file, then I might be getting somewhere. I mean, also this position, I don't know if the computer will care, but I thought that this could be something, unless here black has rook d8, which I'm not sure of because I have some back rank issues. Cannot take on e7. But okay, there might be a smarter way to do it. For example, I could just play something like rook d2 and then rook d1 next. And I don't see how black can immediately solve the problems. So that was the whole point of a3, but it is also a little bit slow. Other moves which I considered were queen f4 or queen d6. After queen f4, I thought he can just go bishop e6. Queen f4, my idea was just rook d6 and rook d1. But here I didn't see anything because a2 again is hanging, and if I protect a2, then he just gets rook d8. I don't know which one, but I thought this cannot really be anything. Also queen b3 can sometimes be there. So I didn't believe in this. David mentioned to me that I should probably try queen d6. And here he mentioned an interesting plan which he would have gone for, which is bishop f5, with the idea to go rook e8 and then bishop c8 back, which does look passive for black, but it's also really hard for white, I think, to achieve anything here. I did not really see this plan in the game, but I thought he has also other options. But this would have probably been quite good. I'm not sure what I can try. I mean, probably something slow like f3, and if rook e8, maybe e4. Assuming he goes back to c8, maybe just to play this position. King f2, and then perhaps push g4, h4, and g5. It could be unpleasant. But okay, here maybe black can play rook d8, exchanging. So yeah, I should probably play rook d1 instead, not f3, because now rook d8 works. I think exchanging one pair of rooks definitely favors black here. So I should start with rook d1, then rook e8, and now already I'm not really getting f3, e4 easily. So it's not so easy. h3, maybe g4, but he could play h5. It's not even so easy for me to get this in. I can probably get it slowly. I don't think the minority attack is achieving anything here. It will just trade some pawns. I don't think that this does any good. And I think black is very solid. It's also not entirely easy to see how black will actually untangle, but maybe just bishop c8 back, rook e5, rook e8, maybe bring the king to e7 and just stay. And maybe I can try rook d4 to prepare g4. Here h5 could also be possible to stop it, but assuming that I even get g4, bishop c8 back, maybe king g2. Let's say rook e8, king g3, king f8, h4, something like this, king e7. Yeah. I mean, also at some point, bishop e6 might actually be an option. Maybe black can do that here. I think it's quite clear that, objectively speaking, it should be completely fine for black. I think this would have been a nice plan, which David mentioned, bishop f5, rook e8, bishop c8. I think this shows David's excellent understanding once again. And probably I cannot achieve anything there. What I actually thought he might do would be a5, with the idea of a4, rook a5, and then to activate the rook on the fifth rank. But I could play a4, which David also said that also the pawn on a5 could become weak. So I think he's completely right that this plan of bishop f5, rook e8 is probably the best for black in this position, again without looking at the engine here. Also here I was not entirely convinced in the game, because black could have ideas to play rook b8 and b5, and it could liquidate quite easily. But okay, after rook b8 I could maybe go away with the bishop, and then if b5, c6 is hanging. So it's not entirely easy. I think definitely what David said is the cleanest, bishop f5, rook e8, and I think black should hold without too many difficulties. Still, it might have been the best try for me. After a3, I think black probably has quite a few ways to be fine now looking back. I still thought I have some pressure here, but David's way was just very, very convincing. He played for active counterplay. In hindsight, I even thought that this, just not queen takes e6, again, I think this could be unpleasant, but even f takes e6 might not be so bad, because if black gets rook d8 and rook d5, I don't know, it seemed like black should be fine, and if queen d7, queen f6, with a double attack, rook d2 fails because of rook d8. And but okay, it's a difficult decision to make, and again, white is never gonna be worse here either. I just thought that it might be possible as well to play like this. The same also here after queen f4. For some moment I thought he might go bishop e6 here just to get this position with a tempo. Again, I'm not sure I actually have anything here, but at least I can be happy that black has an isolated pawn here on e6. But if this actually is anything, again, I'm not really sure. Yeah. But David went for queen g5, which at first surprised me a bit, because I got in the move queen c7, and all of a sudden I thought I have some ideas here on the queen side. My queen is a bit annoying on c7, but he completely, at least I think that he completely correctly assessed everything as fine for him, just because now he gets his bishop activated, and he does have some threats on the king side, most importantly checkmate on g2 now. I think I have to try queen c7, otherwise, I mean, if he takes on f4, then black is going to start playing for a win. And also if I take on g5, then he gets rook d8 next, and black has no issues whatsoever. So bishop e4, bishop f1. G3 would be too weakening. I didn't like that, because then if a queen gets to f3, I would be in big trouble. Bishop d5, I think that was good as well, blocking the d file. And I cannot comfortably take yet, because he has rook f to b8. And then on the next move, he can take on b2, which looks quite active for black. And I played rook d2. This was a decision which I thought about quite a lot. If I go rook d2 or rook d4, rook d2 has a simple idea that now I want to take on b7, and b2 is going to be protected. Rook d4 would look a little bit more active, but I also thought that here he could go for, I think, what he played in the game. No, that I was not so sure of, because, okay, just as a quick reference point, after rook d2, he played rook a e8. With the idea after queen takes b7, he has rook takes e3. And this was actually a point. If I go rook d4 and he goes rook e8 here, then I thought I can play rook d1. And in the game, my rook was on d2. There he had the annoying move bishop b3, I thought. But here, if bishop b3, I can just move my rook. Now rook takes e3 is never working anymore. But among others, black can probably just play rook e7 here or queen e7. And he shouldn't have any issues. For example, queen a5, maybe a6. Bishop on d5 is very strong here. So I don't see anything. Also note that e4 doesn't work because the queen on g4 is protected. So black can just take here and has won a pawn. Yeah, I went rook d2, rook a8. I think that was also a good move. Maybe black also has other options. Like I'm not so sure if I really have anything after rook b8 either. Even difficult to suggest how I would continue. I was even thinking about this idea at some point, g3, bishop g2, to exchange and then try to play for the d file. Again, if I go rook d1, I don't think I'm achieving anything because he can just go back on the next move. So maybe even here it's quite difficult for me to achieve anything. Again, maybe g3, but can maybe play rook c8 and well, I mean I'm getting bishop g2 next. Yeah, maybe this is possible too, but I think that David chose by far the cleanest way with rook e8. I think I should take on b7. Other moves are just pretty passive. I mean, he can also again untangle with rook e7 on the next move. So I decided to take rook takes e3, and here I think I should take on a7 to get some material back. And now he took on a3. I think both of us saw this line coming already a few moves back, and now just a lot of pieces are going to get exchanged. I briefly thought for a second if he wants to play on here with some move, but it would definitely also be very risky for him. Like just to play for some tricks. He doesn't have any other good discoveries. Like if rook e7, I can just protect my rook. I was quickly thinking about a move like rook e4 with the idea that if rook d1, black has bishop b3, and I thought that I'm losing material. But I thought I could go rook d1 now, and black can try to do this. And then play for some ideas with rook g4 or h5, h4. But it doesn't seem like black's attack should break through here. And I thought I have quite a few defensive resources. I just need to bring my queen back somehow. Maybe I can play queen c7, even though then there's rook g4. Actually, I think in this position I thought about g3 with the idea to play bishop g2 next. And it looks quite safe for white, and I think black can definitely be risking here as well. So David made the decision to take on a3. Yeah, I was thinking for a bit if I can also take with the pawn. I probably can, but I don't think it changes the valuation by any means. I don't think that this passed a pawn is a strength. Like even in this endgame, again, he doesn't need to take, but even if he does, I think he can just do this. And if rook a1, for example, just bring the king. I think even if I get my pawn to a6, still like black can play c5, c4, and then maybe even pick up the pawn. His king is just so active. So I don't think that the passed a pawn is really a big strength here. I took with the queen and then played queen c3. And after queen takes c3, I took with the pawn. This might look like a strange decision. It probably is also. This is also a draw and rook c2. Maybe this is a more logical way to do it, because here at least my rook is kind of active. Yeah, I think it doesn't really matter also what I played. I just need to be need to be a bit careful that not a scenario like this happens. Like if black gets something like this, it could at least practically be quite unpleasant. I mean, at some point I might need to give away the pawn. Otherwise, if I just do nothing, then he might bring his king all the way here. Still should be a draw, but I mean, it would be a pity to allow something like this. But I think I'm just in time with everything not to allow it. And g3, bishop g2, exchanging the bishops. He took and played king f8. Yeah, not so sure if you can try anything else. I don't think so. Rook e1, just cutting off the king, and rook e3, and yeah, I think I will leave the rest without any comments. We just played more moves because we have a 40 move rule for draw offers, and this is where we reached move 40 and made a draw, which means that I am still leading the match. I won one game and the rest of the games finished in draws, but it's not like we made any quick draws. I think this game was probably the most, this and game number 2 were probably the most solid ones, with not any substantial chances for both sides. But especially considering the whole match situation, I can't complain. And since we will not play a tiebreak, it also means that at least I tied the match 3-3, even if David wins tomorrow. He's definitely going to try his best to put up a big fight in the last game, and I'm already looking forward to what he's gonna cook up in the last game. Hope you enjoyed today's recap. Make sure to check out all the links in the description down below, and I will see you guys tomorrow for the final recap of my match against Grandmaster David Navara. See you then.